My name is Lily Morrison, and the woman who raised me, my own mother, fired me the moment she became CEO of our family business. You might be thinking, but Lily, surely you had to see this coming, right? Honestly, no, I didn't. For years, my mom, Sylvia Morrison, and I worked side by side, building Morrison Enterprises from the ground up. It was our dream, my mother's vision, and my passion. I spent countless late nights at the office, giving everything I had to make the company thrive. I sacrificed friendships, missed family events, and ignored my own happiness because I believed in her. I believed in us. But all of that was about to change, and I didn't see it coming until it was too late. The morning my mother was appointed CEO was the day my world came crashing down. Sylvia wasn't just my mother. She was the woman I admired, the person I trusted most. For years, I had been the right hand, the one who helped strategize the company's growth. I knew it all, from the client meetings to the late-night brainstorming sessions. We were the power duo. But when the board voted Sylvia in as CEO, something shifted. She became colder, more distant. It was like she transformed overnight into someone unrecognizable. I brushed it off at first. Maybe it was just the stress. After all, becoming CEO was no small feat. But as time went on, I started noticing the little things. Her eyes no longer softened when she looked at me, the way she avoided discussing company decisions with me, and the silence at dinner. I tried to ignore it, told myself I was just imagining things, but the signs were there. The moment that sealed my fate came during a meeting with the board of directors. We had just finished discussing our expansion into international markets, a plan I had worked tirelessly on for months. I was proud of it. I knew it would set us apart from the competition. And then my mother stood up and made an announcement that made my blood run cold. "We're letting Lily go. She's no longer fit for this role. We need to make tough decisions, and she's too emotionally involved. It's time for her to leave Morrison Enterprises." Just like that, my entire world shattered. The words echoed in my mind, over and over. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The betrayal was worse than anything I had ever experienced. The room went silent. The board members were too stunned to speak. My eyes darted to my mother, the woman who had spent my entire life teaching me how to build something great, and now she was the one tearing it all down. She didn't even look at me. She didn't flinch. Her face was cold, calculating, as if this was just another decision to her, another business move, and just like that, I was out. I wanted to scream, to fight back, but my body was frozen. How could she do this to me? After everything we had been through, after everything I had sacrificed for her, for the business, how could she just let me go like I was some outsider, some employee she barely knew? As I packed up my things from the office, I kept replaying her words in my mind. "Too emotionally involved," she had said. Did that mean she never saw me as her daughter? Did I mean nothing to her? Was all this just a game to her? I was no longer a daughter to her. I was just a casualty of her ambition. My heart was breaking as I walked out of those doors for the last time. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. But what I wanted most was to make her feel the sting of what she had done to me. As I stood there in the lobby of the building that had once been my second home, I made a vow. I would not let this go. I would make her pay for what she had done to me. What would you do in my shoes? Comment below, share your thoughts, and don't forget to like this video if you think family should always come first. And subscribe, because this is only the beginning of the story. You won't believe how I got my revenge. Stay tuned, because my plan is just getting started. The day I was fired, I didn't just lose my job, I lost the person I thought would always have my back. It was like a switch had been flipped in my mother, and the woman I once called Mom became a stranger in an instant. As I walked out of that building, the building I had poured my heart and soul into for years, I felt something inside me break. But what hurt the most wasn't the job, wasn't the business. It was the way she had looked at me. Cold, distant. Like I was nothing more than an inconvenience. I had given everything to that company. I had been by her side, helping her build it, supporting her every decision. And this was how she repaid me, by tossing me aside like I didn't matter. I couldn't wrap my head around it. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the utter disregard for everything I had sacrificed. She didn't just fire me, she erased me. For days, I tried to make sense of it. I replayed every moment in my mind, every conversation, every hug, every word of encouragement she had ever given me, was any of it real? Or was it all just a strategy to keep me close until she didn't need me anymore? I wanted answers, but she didn't offer any. My phone calls went unanswered. Her secretary claimed she was too busy, but I knew the truth. She was avoiding me. I spent the next few weeks wallowing in self-pity. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. All I could think about was how my life had just unraveled. I had nowhere to go. Morrison Enterprises was my life, and now it wasn't even a part of my world. My friends, they didn't know what to say. Everyone was too uncomfortable to talk about it. I had been erased. But then, one night, as I sat in my small apartment, staring out the window at the city below, I had a thought that sent a chill down my spine. What if I didn't just let it go? What if I did something about it? For weeks, I had felt powerless. But in that moment, something shifted. My pain turned into anger, and my anger turned into resolve. I had been nothing more than a pawn in her game, but I was done being controlled. I had nothing left to lose, and that thought, it lit a fire in me. I could get back at her. I could make her feel what I felt. I could build something so powerful that she wouldn't even recognize it. And when she did, when she realized what I had done, maybe then she would understand the weight of what she had taken from me. But how? I spent days researching, calculating, building. The one thing my mother didn't know about me was that I was resourceful. I had been learning everything I could about the business. I knew the ins and outs of Morrison Enterprises, its operations, its weaknesses, its strengths. I had the knowledge I needed to bring it down, but I needed more. I needed leverage. And that's when I found it. I started talking to old colleagues who had been with me at the company, digging for any information that could help. I learned about a series of financial discrepancies that my mother had been hiding. Small things at first, but if I pieced them all together, it could be enough to shake her company to its core. But even with that information, I needed more. I needed a way to make her feel the sting of betrayal, to show her that I had been paying attention all along. I needed to make her think I was just an ordinary person, someone she had tossed aside. The thing is, I wasn't just angry. I wasn't just seeking revenge. What she had done to me, it had shattered me in ways I couldn't explain. But now I had one goal, to make her regret the day she chose ambition over family. And I knew exactly how I was going to do it. It wouldn't be enough to just bring down her business. No, that would be too easy. I wanted something more. I wanted her to feel the isolation, the loneliness, the fear that comes with realizing you've destroyed the one thing that should have mattered most. I would take everything she held dear and make her beg for forgiveness. I spent the next few weeks building my own company, my own empire, just as Morrison Enterprises had once been. But unlike her, I wasn't doing it for power. I was doing it for something much more satisfying: revenge. I knew it wouldn't be easy. But as I sat in my office, the pieces finally falling into place, I knew one thing for sure: she had no idea what was coming. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you get back at the one person who betrayed you, or would you let it slide? Let me know in the comments. And if you're ready for the next part, where my plan finally starts to unfold, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned. The real fun is just beginning. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but what they don't tell you is that it's also a dish that takes time to prepare. Every step, every move needs to be calculated. If you rush it, you risk everything. I wasn't about to make that mistake. The more I thought about my plan, the more I realized how much power I had over my mother's company. Morrison Enterprises was built on the trust of its clients, employees, and investors. But trust, like glass, can shatter in an instant. I knew exactly where I could strike to make her feel the burn of betrayal. And once I set my sights on something, there was no turning back. For days, I buried myself in spreadsheets, financial reports, and market analyses. I called in old contacts, leveraging the relationships I had built over the years to get information on the company's weaknesses. The small discrepancies I'd uncovered were just the beginning, but I needed more. I needed something that would cripple her, something she couldn't brush off. It didn't take long to find it. One of the clients my mother had been working with had become increasingly dissatisfied with her leadership. They were powerful, influential, and their opinion could make or break the company. This client had been one of the first to express concerns over Sylvia's leadership decisions. I could feel it in my gut. This was my opening. I wasn't going to just make Sylvia lose a few contracts. I was going to make her lose everything. I reached out to the client, pretending to be just another disgruntled former employee. It wasn't hard. I knew all the right questions to ask, all the right buttons to push. And when I got them to speak, I fed them more than they even knew they were offering. I hinted at discrepancies, suggesting they look into Sylvia's financial records. Subtly, of course, just enough to plant the seed of doubt. The next step in my plan was even more devious. Morrison Enterprises had been struggling to innovate. The company had once been on the cutting edge, but now it was falling behind in a rapidly evolving market. My mother's pride had blinded her to the fact that she was becoming irrelevant. I knew this would be her undoing. I started quietly developing my own product line, something that would challenge everything she had built. A product so unique, so revolutionary, that it would make her look outdated. I hired a team of experts, some of the best in the industry, and we worked in secret. No one knew, not even my closest friends. It was just me and a handful of trusted individuals, all working towards one goal, making Sylvia feel the sting of being replaced. But it wasn't just about the business. No, I had to go deeper. I needed to target her on a personal level. I began researching her life, her past, every little detail I could find. I found an old family friend who had once worked with my mother, someone who knew her history better than anyone. This person had a story that could destroy Sylvia's credibility, one that no amount of money could fix. I had to get that story. Over the next few weeks, I made sure to turn every stone. I pulled every string. I knew that if I was going to bring Sylvia to her knees, I had to do it in a way that left no room for redemption. It had to be personal. As I sat in my small office, surrounded by confidential papers and my laptop glowing with success, I realized something. I wasn't just getting back at my mother. I was becoming her. I was building my own empire, yes, but I was also learning to play the game better than she ever had. And soon, very soon, she would have no choice but to acknowledge me. One thing I knew for sure, I wasn't going to stop until she understood the depth of what she had done. She would regret firing me. She would regret thinking she could wipe me out of her life like I was nothing. But there was one problem. Sylvia wasn't a woman who crumbled easily. She was smart, too smart. I had to stay one step ahead of her. I had to be ready for her retaliation because I knew she would fight back. And when she did, it would be a battle I wasn't sure I could win. But that didn't matter. I was in this now, and I wasn't turning back. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you take the risk and fight back, or would you walk away? Let me know what you think. Hit that like button if you've ever been in a situation where you had to fight for what was yours. Stay tuned till the end. I take the first major step in my plan. It's about to get real, and you won't believe how Sylvia reacts. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. I knew Sylvia wouldn't take my betrayal lying down. It was only a matter of time before she figured out what I was doing. But that didn't stop me. If anything, it fueled my determination. The first strike had to be swift, calculated, and undeniable. I had gathered everything I needed, the information, the leverage, the products. Now it was time to watch the pieces fall into place. The first target was Morrison Enterprises' biggest client, the one I had planted seeds of doubt with. This was the moment I had been waiting for. If I could convince them to pull their contract with her, it would send a shockwave through the entire company. It would shake her foundation and show her that she had made a powerful enemy, someone who knew all her weaknesses. And that someone was me. I knew the client was about to review their quarterly contracts, and I made sure I had a private meeting with their CEO. I walked into the boardroom with nothing but confidence, my professional attire crisp, my composure unshakable. I wasn't the same person who had been fired. No, this new version of me was colder, sharper. This was a woman with a purpose. "Thank you for meeting with me," I began, offering a polite but firm handshake. "I'm sure you're aware that things have changed at Morrison Enterprises." The CEO, a tall man in his 50s with a weathered face, raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" he asked, his tone cautious but curious. He had been a client of Morrison Enterprises for over 15 years, but the cracks in Sylvia's leadership were beginning to show. I took a deep breath, letting the tension build. It was time to strike. "I've been keeping an eye on the company," I said, leaning forward slightly. "And I've noticed some irregularities in their financial reports, things that, if left unchecked, could jeopardize the future of the company. I wouldn't want you to be caught off guard if this turns into something more serious." I saw the shift in his eyes. The seed I had planted earlier had now sprouted. His mind was racing, evaluating the possibilities. This was it. "I also wanted to share something else," I continued, allowing the silence to stretch for a few beats. "I've been working on my own product line, and I have a proposal that could completely transform the industry." His interest peaked. He was listening now. "I think you'll find it's a far more innovative and sustainable approach than what you're currently working with," I added, giving him just a glimpse of what I had been working on. A small taste of the future I was building, and the threat it posed to Sylvia. The tension in the room was palpable. He took a moment to digest my words before speaking. "You've got my attention. We'll need to review the details before we make any decisions, but I must admit, it sounds promising." I smiled, but it wasn't one of triumph. No, this was a calculated smile, the kind you give when you know you've just sealed the deal. I had successfully shaken Sylvia's biggest client, and it was only a matter of time before the dominoes began to fall. As I walked out of the building, my heart was racing. The first strike had been made, and it had been effective. But I couldn't stop here. I had to keep pushing, keep escalating. Sylvia needed to understand that she had no control over me anymore. But the thing about revenge is, it's never as easy as it seems. Sylvia wasn't some weak, naive woman. She wasn't just going to stand by and watch me tear everything down. The very next day, I received a call that confirmed my suspicions. Sylvia was already making her move. She had launched a counterattack. Through her connections, she had found out that I had been the one behind the client's doubts. She was furious. I could feel it in the very air. I knew she would come at me with everything she had, but I was ready. What she didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment for months. I smiled to myself. This was going to be a fight to the finish, but I was no longer the one on the ropes. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Sylvia tried everything to keep her business afloat, using every resource at her disposal to discredit me, to undermine my new company. She used her influence in the industry to plant false rumors about my product, calling it unreliable, untested. She tried to sabotage my relationships with clients. But she underestimated one thing. I wasn't the same person she had fired. I fought back, and I fought hard. Every time she attacked, I hit back twice as hard. I started leaking confidential information about her leadership failures to the press, nothing too damaging, just enough to make people question her decisions. It worked. The press started picking up on it, and soon, the whispers about Sylvia's incompetence grew louder. But this wasn't about her business anymore. This was about making her feel the weight of her betrayal, about making her regret every moment she had treated me like nothing more than an employee. What would you do if someone tried to take everything from you? Would you fight back? Or would you let them destroy everything you worked for? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because you won't believe what I have planned next. By now, the game had shifted entirely. Morrison Enterprises was on the verge of collapse, and it wasn't just because of the financial issues. No, the cracks were deeper, more personal. Sylvia was unraveling, and I was watching it happen in real time. She had no idea just how much I knew about her weaknesses and how far I was willing to go to bring her down. It had been weeks since I set my plan into motion, and everything was starting to fall into place. I had successfully crippled her largest contracts, drained her most loyal clients, and now it was time for the final reveal, the moment I would step into the spotlight and show my mother just who I had become. I had been watching her every move, studying her mistakes, and I realized one key thing. Sylvia Morrison was losing her grip on everything she had built. Her once unshakable confidence had turned into desperation. Every decision she made only seemed to dig her in deeper. And that's when I knew it was time to strike the hardest blow. One night, while she was at a company gala, celebrating what she believed would be a victorious year, I launched my final offensive. I took a deep breath as I stared at the screen in front of me. This was it. The entire plan would be executed tonight, and there was no turning back. I had been leaking pieces of sensitive company information to the press for weeks, but I knew I had to hit her where it would hurt the most. I wasn't just after her career anymore. I wanted her reputation, her pride, her dignity, everything that made her Sylvia Morrison. I had secretly coordinated with a group of former employees who had been wronged by her, individuals who had been cast aside during her rise to power. They had stories, powerful, untold stories that could ruin her image. I gathered those stories together, edited them carefully, and released them to a trusted reporter. The details were damning. It painted her as a manipulative, cutthroat leader who had destroyed the lives of countless people to get to the top. It wasn't just corporate sabotage anymore. This was personal. And as the stories started flooding the news feeds, I could already feel the weight of my actions crushing Sylvia's carefully crafted empire. The public backlash was swift. And it was brutal. Her name was no longer synonymous with success. It was now a symbol of corruption and betrayal. But what I hadn't expected was what happened next. Sylvia's response. She couldn't just let it go. She wasn't the type to lie down and accept defeat. No, she came out swinging, attempting to use every ounce of power she had left to deflect the damage. But it was too late. The damage had already been done. The seeds I had planted had grown into a full-fledged scandal, and now she was the one trying to clean up the mess. I could see her struggling, watching from the sidelines as the company she had worked so hard to build began to slip through her fingers. Her board members were calling her in for emergency meetings, trying to salvage what little was left of the company's reputation. The investors who had once praised her were now looking for a way out. And as she tried desperately to hold it all together, she looked more like a lost little girl than the powerful woman who had once fired me without a second thought. But what hit her hardest, the blow she hadn't seen coming, was the fact that I was no longer the woman she could control. She had thought I was weak, that I was nothing more than a pawn in her game. But I had proven her wrong. That night, as I watched the news coverage unfold, I felt a mix of emotions. Satisfaction, rage, and something else, a sense of closure. But even as I stood victorious, I couldn't help but ask myself, is this really what I wanted? I had watched Sylvia suffer, watched her downfall, but deep down, I knew the cost of this revenge. I had lost my mother in the process. The person I had once called family was gone, replaced by a stranger I barely recognized. I had made her feel every ounce of pain she had put me through, but now I was left with the hollow feeling of what revenge really cost me. And though I had achieved everything I set out to do, I couldn't escape the feeling that I had lost a part of myself in the process. What would you have done if you were in my position? Would you feel the same emptiness after exacting your revenge, or would you feel satisfaction? Let me know in the comments. It's said that revenge is sweet, but as I sit here, watching the wreckage of everything my mother had worked for, I realize something: revenge isn't sweet. It's bitter. It doesn't bring back what you've lost. It doesn't restore the things you sacrificed along the way, and it certainly doesn't heal the part of your heart that was broken in the first place. The chaos surrounding Morrison Enterprises was deafening. The news was all over the place. The board members were scrambling to find a way to salvage the company. Sylvia, once untouchable, was now in a battle for her life, and I could see the desperation in her eyes. But there was a part of me that couldn't help but feel empty. I had won, yes, but at what cost? For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to stop. I stopped watching the news. I stopped following the lawsuits and investigations. I stopped following every move Sylvia made. I needed a break, a moment to breathe. I had gotten everything I wanted, but now I was questioning if it was enough. It wasn't until that day, that fateful day, that everything changed. I was sitting at my desk, reviewing my company's growth and planning for the future, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something inside me told me to look. "Lily, it's Mom. We need to talk. Come home." I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity. Sylvia was reaching out to me. After everything that had happened, after everything I had done, she was asking me to come home. I didn't know what to make of it. Was this some kind of last-ditch attempt at redemption? A plea for forgiveness? Or was it a manipulation, another way for her to try and reclaim control? I didn't know what to feel, but I knew I couldn't ignore it. I had spent so much of my life trying to prove something to her, to make her see me. Now, for the first time, she was reaching out. I didn't respond immediately. I needed time. I needed to figure out what this meant. The last time I had seen her, she was just a shell of the woman I once knew, trying to hold on to a crumbling empire. But this was different. This was her reaching out, vulnerable, asking for something. I decided to go. I had to face her. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew I couldn't keep running from the reality of our relationship. If this was going to end, it had to end on our terms. Not mine, not hers, but ours. I arrived at the house, the one we had shared for so many years. The place where I had grown up, where my dreams had been shaped, and where the foundation of Morrison Enterprises had been built. The house was the same, but everything felt different now. The air was heavy with memories, and the once warm space now felt cold, empty. She was sitting in the living room, her eyes tired but determined. Sylvia was no longer the powerful CEO. She wasn't the woman who had fired me. She was just a mother, broken and human. "Sit down, Lily," she said, her voice cracking slightly. I sat across from her, my hands folded in my lap. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I even wanted to hear what she had to say. "I've been thinking about everything," she started, her eyes avoiding mine. "I was wrong, Lily. I was so consumed by the power I had that I couldn't see what I was doing to you. You were my daughter and I should have protected you. Instead, I pushed you away. I hurt you more than anyone else could, and for that, I'm sorry." The words were slow and careful, like she was measuring every syllable, every breath. She looked tired, not just physically, but emotionally. This wasn't the woman who had fired me in cold blood. This was a woman who had lost her way, who had pushed away everything that truly mattered to her. This was a woman who realized she had no one left. I sat there in silence, letting her words sink in. Part of me wanted to shout at her, to remind her of everything she had taken from me. Part of me wanted to tell her how much she had hurt me, how she had ruined my life, how she had destroyed the one thing that had always been there, our family. But another part of me, a part I didn't even know existed, softened. I wasn't sure if I was ready to forgive her. I wasn't even sure if forgiveness was possible. But I did know one thing: I had a choice. I could keep holding on to the bitterness, the anger, the desire for revenge, or I could let go of all of it, let go of the hate and the need to destroy her. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," I finally said, my voice trembling slightly. "But I do know this. I built my empire. I did what I set out to do. I got my revenge, and I don't need to tear you apart anymore, because I'm stronger than I was before." Her face softened, tears filling her eyes. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't deserve anything. But I want you to know I'm sorry, and I'm proud of you for everything you've done." We sat there for a long time, the silence between us heavy but not as suffocating as before. It wasn't a perfect resolution. We didn't walk away from that room suddenly best friends, but it was a start to heal what had been broken for so long. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you forgive the person who hurt you the most? Or would you hold on to your anger? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're still here, thank you for being part of this journey with me. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because, in the end, revenge isn't always as satisfying as we think.